He thought he'd just pulled over an old man in a truck. 7 minutes later, unmarked black SUVs would surround the station, and 2 officers' careers would be over forever. The highway was nothing but blacktop cutting through endless pine trees. The air was still, heavy, and silent, until the sudden flash of blue and red lights shattered it. A patrol cruiser slid onto the shoulder, tires crunching over loose gravel. The lights painted the road in bursts of color, washing over the rust-speckled body of an old Chevrolet CK500. Behind the wheel sat Jeremiah Sutton, 63, dark-skinned, his face marked by decades of sun and strain. His eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead, his hands calm and steady on the wheel. The cruiser's driver's door opened. Officer Dale Harding stepped out, heavy-set, late 40s, jaw locked in authority. His flashlight beam cut into the cab of the truck. On the other side, Officer Kyle Nash, 32, lean, alert, moved into position, his hand hovering near his holster. License and registration. Harding's voice was sharp, automatic. Sutton didn't rush. He moved slowly, deliberately, and handed the documents over without a word. Jeremiah Sutton, Harding read aloud, letting the name hang. Fancy name for these back roads. Nash's gaze landed on Sutton's faded army jacket. That's Army. You serve. Long time ago, Sutton replied. What branch? What unit? Harding pressed. Army. Special Activities Division. Harding smirked. Special Activities, huh? Sounds like a nice way to say, janitor. Nash chuckled quietly. Pop the glove box, Harding ordered. You looking for something? Sutton asked. Routine check. Standard for vehicles like yours. Sutton looked him in the eye. There's a Colt M1911 in there. Registered. And you didn't tell us that sooner. Harding said, stepping closer. You didn't ask. Harding yanked open the door. Out. Hands where I can see 'em. Sutton stepped out, movement smooth and unhurried. Weapons legal. Had it since '79. Not loaded. Nash pulled the pistol from the glove box, inspecting it. You got a permit. Back pocket, Sutton replied. Harding spun him, shoving him against the truck. Nash pulled the wallet free and checked. Dale, it's valid. State and federal, Nash said. Don't care if it's signed by the president. Feels wrong, Harding muttered. The cuffs locked around Sutton's wrists. In '87, I pulled 9 civilians out of a schoolhouse in El Salvador. Never made the news, Sutton said quietly. Harding laughed once. Yeah, I played for the Braves. Get in the car. The cruiser door slammed shut, sealing the night back into silence. But the next 7 minutes would turn this traffic stop into a career-ending mistake. Jeremiah Sutton sat in the back of the cruiser, the cuffs cold against his wrists. Outside, Harding and Nash stood near the hood of the old truck, their breath clouding in the cool night air. You run his name yet? Nash asked. Not yet, Harding replied, flipping Sutton's license in his hand. We'll do that back at the station. I want to take a look inside first. Nash frowned. Without a warrant? Harding gave a tight smile. We don't need one. Probable cause. He glanced back at Sutton through the rear window. The old man's posture hadn't changed. Calm, still, like someone waiting for a bus, not sitting under arrest. That bothered Harding more than he wanted to admit. Harding stepped to the driver's door and leaned in, his flashlight beam sweeping over the cab. Floor mats worn thin, dust clinging to the dash, an empty thermos wedged between the seats. Nothing out of place. Nash opened the passenger door and rifled through the glove box again, then under the seat. Nothing here but maps. Old ones. Harding's jaw tightened. He's hiding something. From inside the cruiser, Sutton spoke just loud enough for them to hear. You ever stop to think maybe I'm not? Harding slammed the door shut. Quiet. Nash looked uneasy now. Dale, he's got federal clearance on that permit. That's not common. Clearance or not, he's hiding something, Harding repeated. We'll sort it at the station. The ride back was silent, except for the low hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. Sutton kept his gaze fixed on the road ahead, as if replaying a memory only he could see. When they pulled into the small county station, Harding parked, yanked the door open, and guided Sutton inside. The reception area was quiet, lit by the hum of old fluorescent tubes. Deputy Lena Wallace sat behind the desk, sipping coffee, her brow furrowing as she watched Harding march Sutton past her. "You run a full ID on him yet?" she asked. "Getting to it," Harding replied. "You're supposed to do that first, Dale," Wallace said firmly. "That's protocol." Harding waved her off. "He's just an old guy with a gun he shouldn't have." But Sutton didn't look at Harding. His eyes lingered on Wallace for a brief second, like he knew something she didn't. Harding led him to a holding cell and closed the door. The heavy lock clanked, echoing through the station. From his workstation, Nash logged into the terminal and began typing Sutton's details. The moment his fingers hit enter, the screen flickered. A red icon blinked into life next to Sutton's name, a warning neither officer had ever seen before. Before Nash could ask, the phone on the back wall rang. Line 5. The one that never rang. Harding picked it up. "Sheriff's office." A voice on the other end was cold, direct. "You have Jeremiah Sutton in custody." It wasn't a question. "Yeah. Who is this?" Harding asked. "This is Agent Sterling. We are 7 minutes out. Do not move him. Do not question him. And under no circumstances are you to speak to him again. Is that understood?" Harding's throat tightened. "Wait, what is this about?" The line went dead. Wallace stood slowly. "Who was that?" Harding didn't answer. But outside, through the front windows, headlights swept across the lot. 3 black, unmarked SUVs rolled in, moving in perfect formation. The 3 black SUVs rolled to a silent stop in front of the station. Engines cut off in perfect unison. Harding and Nash stood frozen, watching as the doors opened at the exact same time. Men in dark suits stepped out, their movements sharp, coordinated, like every step had been rehearsed. The station door swung open without a knock. A tall man with steel-gray hair and a presence that seemed to pull the air out of the room walked in first. "Agent Sterling," he said simply without offering a hand. He didn't look at Harding. Didn't look at Nash. His eyes went straight to the holding cell. "We'll take it from here," he said, voice steady but absolute. One of his men, Agent Price, walked to a workstation and plugged in a slim, secure laptop. Footage, paperwork, and a log of every word spoken to him since the moment of arrest, Sterling ordered, still not looking away from Sutton. "Hey, hang on," Harding stammered. "You can't just..." Sterling turned, his gaze cutting him off like a blade. "Officer, you are detaining a protected federal asset. That man is not to be questioned or processed without direct clearance from the Pentagon. If you have a problem, call them." Harding's mouth opened, but no words came out. Inside the cell, Jeremiah Sutton looked up at Sterling. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice dry. "Traffic was a mess," Sterling replied. A faint smile crossed his face before vanishing. "They treat you with respect?" Sterling asked. Sutton's eyes shifted briefly to Harding. "I've had worse. At least they only asked me what unit I served in once." Nash stepped forward, nervous. "Look, we didn't know who he was. The weapon wasn't declared. You didn't know because you didn't listen," Agent Price said coldly without looking up from his laptop. "And for that, you've both been flagged for mishandling a class-sensitive individual." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sterling unlocked the cell with a quick code. "Sergeant Sutton," he said, voice respectful. Sutton stood, his joints cracking softly as he rose. Sterling stepped aside to let him out. "Do you want to press charges for the arrest?" Sterling asked. Sutton shook his head. "Not worth the paperwork. But I'd like my sidearm back." Price retrieved it from an evidence case and handed it over in a sealed container. "You're cleared, Sergeant." Sutton took it, turning back to Harding. You ever get a gut feeling about someone, he asked quietly, and then choose to ignore it for an easier, uglier thought? Harding's lips parted, but no answer came. Maybe next time, Sutton said. You'll ask before you assume. Sterling looked over his shoulder. We need to move. Now. As Sutton and the agents walked toward the door, Sterling glanced back at Harding and Nash. Every word you've said tonight is now part of a federal investigation. If your body cam shows mistreatment, expect to hear from our legal branch. They stepped outside into the cold night air. The SUV's engines came to life in perfect sync. Inside, Harding and Nash stood rooted in place, the reality of what just happened pressing down like a weight neither of them could shake. The cold night air followed Sterling and Sutton back inside as Agent Price's voice broke the silence. Here's what you missed, Price said, his tone flat. His eyes locked on the laptop screen. Jeremiah Sutton, Master Sergeant, retired. Attached to Task Force 11 throughout the 80s and 90s. Stationed in locations that don't officially exist. Recipient of the Medal of Valor and a Pentagon citation for preservation of civilian life. Harding blinked, trying to process the words. If he's a hero, why the red flag in your system? Sterling stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Harding. Because Sergeant Sutton isn't just a veteran. He's part of a standing protection program for operatives whose past actions carry severe international consequences. He gestured toward the sealed pistol case Sutton now held. That Colt M1911 you seized. It's the primary piece of evidence in a case that stopped an entire embassy from being overrun in 1989. There are people who would pay millions to get their hands on him. Or that weapon. Nash's face went pale. You mean, someone might be tracking him? Not might, Price said without looking up. They are. Harding instinctively took a step back, as if distance could undo the last hour. We had no idea, he muttered. Sterling's voice dropped, heavy with disappointment. No, you didn't. You saw an old black man in a beat-up truck and made an assumption. And that's the problem. In the background, another agent finished downloading body cam and dash cam footage. Every smirk, every shove, every word was now preserved on a secure federal drive. Sutton stood quietly, watching Harding and Nash with an expression that wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. The look of a man who had carried too much for too long. Sterling turned back to Sutton. Sergeant, if you'd like to file a complaint, now's the time. Sutton shook his head. No, I'm not here to make enemies I don't need. I just want my sidearm and my exit. Price closed the evidence case and handed it to Sutton. You're cleared. Sutton accepted it and stepped closer to Harding. You ever been in a firefight? He asked quietly. Harding said nothing. Sutton's voice stayed even, but his eyes sharpened. Ever had to decide who lives and who dies while a sniper's scope is aimed at a mother holding her child? Harding's throat worked, but still no words came. That's what I've done, Sutton continued. And you couldn't even see past your own prejudice long enough to ask the right questions. The room went still. Even Nash dropped his gaze to the floor. Sterling broke the silence. Time to move. We've already been here too long. As Sutton walked toward the door with the agents, Deputy Wallace called out softly, Sir, I think these are yours. She held out a pair of worn dog tags. Sutton took them, closing his fingers around the cool metal. Thank you, Deputy. For the first time that night, Sutton allowed himself the smallest of smiles. But it faded quickly. He knew the danger wasn't over. The black SUVs idled outside, their headlights spilling across the parking lot. Sterling opened the rear door of the lead vehicle, waiting as Sutton stepped forward. Harding stood by the booking desk, his badge feeling heavier than it ever had before. Nash lingered near the workstation, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Sutton paused at the doorway. He turned back toward the two officers, his voice low but clear. You think I care about your cuffs? About a night in a cell? I've had snipers in tree lines and rockets in the sky. You can't scare me with procedure." He let the words hang for a moment, then added, "What I care about is respect, the kind you give without having to be asked." No one moved. The only sound was the low rumble of the SUV engines. Sterling gave Harding and Nash one last look. "A formal request for disciplinary review is being sent to the State Department," he said. "You arrested a protected federal asset, mocked his service, and ignored protocol. Those actions have consequences." Sutton stepped into the SUV. The door closed with a quiet, final thunk. Within seconds, the convoy rolled away, disappearing into the dark stretch of Highway 48. Inside the station, the silence felt heavier than any noise. Deputy Wallace returned to her desk, shaking her head. Harding sank into a chair, his mind replaying every choice he'd made that night. Nash rubbed his hands over his face, the reality sinking in. 3 weeks later, the letters arrived. Officer Kyle Nash was permanently reassigned to desk duty, stripped of his patrol car and his pride. Officer Dale Harding's badge was suspended indefinitely. His career in law enforcement was effectively over. They had pulled over what they thought was just another old man in a worn-out truck. In doing so, they had brought down a force of justice they never knew existed. And somewhere, far from Highway 48, Jeremiah Sutton carried on, still watching, still waiting, still ready for the day his country might call him again. If this story made you think, share it. Subscribe for more stories.